Hello, my name is Carolyn Wilkins. I'm a psychic, a medium, and a healer with a passionate interest in discovering everything I can about the history of my African ancestors. In preparation for my trip to South Carolina, I prayed that I might make some kind of spiritual connection to the ancestors who had lived there. Following a nudge from my inner guidance, I got on the internet and discovered a reconstructed slave village located at Hobcaw Barony, which was just an hour's drive from my hotel. When my husband and I arrived, we found that many of the exhibits in the Welcome Center were about Bernard Baruch, the famous Wall Street financier who had purchased the 16,000-acre plantation in 1905. All very interesting, I thought, but where were the black people? Located in a tiny corner was a small display about rice farming and plantation life. As I leaned in to take a closer look, I spotted a picture of an old African American woman in a head wrap. As I studied her photo, the atmosphere in the room seemed to shift. Although I was standing by myself at the time, I had the distinct impression of someone next to me. Could this be the spiritual ancestor I'd been praying to connect with? Laura Carr was born into slavery in 1858. Until her death in 1935, she was a field hand, a midwife, and a healer for the hundreds of African Americans living on the plantation. Shards of glass and talismans found on her mantelpiece clearly indicate that she practiced the African ways. Behind the house next door, archaeologists have created a bottle tree similar to the one Laura Carr might have used to trap and neutralize negative spiritual energy. She would also, however, have attended the Christian services at the slave church across the road from her home. Here is the two-room cabin where she lived with her family. This cabin was built in 1840. When Bernard Baruch wanted to renovate the cabin in the 1900s, Carr refused. One local historian quotes a rumor that Laura Carr, quote, threatened to put a root on Baruch if he tried to renovate her home, close quote. During her lifetime, it's a fact that Laura Carr's home was never touched. Many years after her death, when it was finally renovated, a mojo pouch containing human hair was found hidden inside the wall. Clear evidence that she had protected her home spiritually and did not want outside vibrations in her space. In a time and place where black people were routinely treated as second-class citizens, Laura Carr had been able to impose her will. I found further evidence that Carr was a force to be reckoned with on the plantation in a cartoon made by the well-known illustrator Rockwell Kent. The cartoon is a map of the Hobcaw Barony, and it actually hangs on the wall in the big house dining room. In this cartoon, Laura Carr is portrayed as a massive Aunt Jemima type, a mammy surrounded by black children. But the real-life Laura Carr was no joke. A skilled midwife she had brought hundreds of babies into the world during the course of her 77 years. Her knowledge of herbal medicine would have been invaluable in treating illnesses due to venomous snake bites, flu, yellow fever, and other diseases. According to the Indigenous Remedies website, African Americans living in the low country of South Carolina knew how to work with more than 60 different varieties of herbs. As the root doctor and shaman for the slaves of Friendfield Plantation, Laura Carr would have used her spiritual knowledge to protect and empower her community. She would have been respected and perhaps even feared by blacks and whites alike. Laura Carr is buried in the slave graveyard in the woods near Friendfield Village. In an interesting side note, Michelle Obama's great-grandfather, Jim Robinson, is also buried in the African American graveyard there. This cemetery, like so many other slave cemeteries, has not been maintained and is virtually returned to its natural state. There are no headstones, and the wooden grave markers that would have been there have rotted away long ago. As my husband and I left Hobcob Barony and returned to our vacation in Myrtle Beach, I found myself overcome by conflicting emotions. On the one hand, I felt deep gratitude for the spiritual ancestors that I had connected with on the plantation. At the same time, the gross inequities that they would have experienced on a daily basis were painful to contemplate. Bernard Baruch was one of the wealthiest men in America when he owned Hobcob Barony. But the African Americans who lived on his property and who worked for him were not provided with either electricity or running water, even as late as 1952. Local historian Ramon Jackson also points out that the Baruch family refused to allow anyone who had moved away from Friendfield Village to return, even to be buried next to their loved ones on the property. I cannot fix the world, but when I claim my own spiritual power, a power made possible by the wisdom, strength, and persistence of my ancestors, I affirm the reality that change is possible. In a very real sense, I am the walking fulfillment of their long-deferred dreams. In the spirit